end where the stars began. They were wrong. From a single world of blue and green, they spread like wildfire through the void. It took 1,000 years, a dozen wars, and one shared understanding that survival meant unity. The nations of old were buried under the Stellar Accord, a covenant forged not by peace, but by exhaustion. When Earth itself began to dim under the weight of its own history, humanity looked upward and decided to make the stars their inheritance. Every new world taught them something: that pain breeds innovation, that scarcity drives genius, and that the human spirit thrives most where it should have perished. The first colonies fell. The second fought each other. The third endured. By the fourth, humans learned to build cities in storms of glass and live in atmospheres that ate through steel. It was never easy. It was never meant to be. But they adapted. That was their power. In time, the Milky Way became a home too small for their ambitions. When they built ships that could leap between galaxies, no one believed it possible. But disbelief had never stopped them. The project was called Horizon, a fleet of 50 starliners, science vessels, and combat escorts carrying 300,000 souls, explorers, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers bound for the dark between galaxies. Their mission: to map, colonize, and establish a beacon of human presence beyond known space. They were told the journey would take decades. They were told there was nothing beyond but silence. But they went anyway. They always went. The fleet's leader was Admiral Rhea Solis, a quiet strategist whose voice carried calm even when the universe screamed. Her logs became the backbone of humanity's story, her tone steady, her words clear. We are not conquering the stars. We are reminding them we exist. Years passed in the void. Communication legs stretched until Earth became a fading echo. Stars grew sparse, and the black between them thickened. In that endless silence, the fleet continued, sustained by faith and repetition. Humans built gardens inside halls of titanium, painted skies on the ceilings of metal decks, whispered old songs into recycled air. They made the void feel like home. Then they noticed it's something watching. Not a signal, not a shape. A pattern. Subtle distortions along sensor fields, a pulse that followed their jumps, matching, mirroring, learning. At first it was dismissed as cosmic interference. Then the probes appeared, obsidian fragments gliding silently alongside the fleet, unresponsive to hails, reflecting no light, absorbing every scan. 4 months, the watchers hovered, indifferent yet deliberate. The scientists called them artifacts. The soldiers called them eyes. Solis called them a choice. We can fear what watches us, or we can remind it why we left home. Humanity had encountered other species before: traders, diplomats, rivals, but these were different. No communication, no exchange. Only observation. It was as if something ancient and vast had turned its gaze toward them and found them curious. The first transmission came in frequencies that weren't meant for human ears. When decoded, it wasn't a message but a judgment: you are anomalies. Return to the cradle or be erased. They didn't turn back. Solis's response was a single line transmitted on every band, every wavelength: we are anomalies by nature. That's why we survive. The probes vanished. For a time, silence returned, heavier, thicker, watchful. Then the universe moved. Without warning, the jump network collapsed. Ships midway through transit never reappeared. Space twisted, engines screamed, coordinates failed. The fleet plunged out of the known path and into a place where the laws of physics felt wrong. Stars flickered like dying embers. Instruments went blind. Half the fleet was gone. The rest drifted, crippled, bleeding oxygen and data alike. The horizon itself was silent. Gravity failed. Fires burned where there should be none. In the chaos, human instinct took command. No one waited for orders. They acted. Pilots rerouted power through melted conduits with their bare hands. Engineers used pressure suits to weld breaches from the outside. Doctors stabilized patients using equipment meant for machines. No one panicked. They worked. They had been raised on catastrophe. It was their native language. Days passed before Solis's voice returned to the network. Static choked her words, but the meaning was clear. If you can hear me, you are not lost. The stars have simply not learned our names yet. They counted survivors, 27 ships. Life support dwindling. Engines offline. The void around them a region no chart recognized. And then they saw it, a structure hanging in the dark, the size of a continent, built from materials unknown, rotating with impossible precision. It wasn't a station. It was something older. Something waiting. Drones sent toward it vanished without trace. Scans failed. Even radiation refused to behave. Yet it called to them. Patterns in its orbit aligned perfectly with the remaining ship's power signatures, like a lock searching for a key. Many believed it was a trap. Others believed it was salvation. Humanity has always confused the two. They approached. The construct's surface shimmered, a lattice of light that rearranged itself when observed. Fragments of geometry folded into new forms, unreadable, deliberate. As the fleet drew closer, the system stabilized. A signal emerged, mathematical, elegant, untranslatable. It wasn't language. It was recognition. The fleet's AI deciphered fragments, origin acknowledged. Deviation detected. Purpose uncertain, Solis replied manually. Our purpose is survival. The construct responded with silence, and then, an opening. Inside, sensors mapped corridors wider than cities, hulls carved by forces no human tool could replicate. In the center, a core pulsing with energy signatures older than recorded time. It radiated power beyond comprehension, yet it was dying. Solis made the decision, no one else would. She ordered a boarding team. What they found became legend. The interior was a library not of books, but of realities. Each fragment of the construct contained stored histories of civilizations long dead. Visuals, memories, blueprints, consciousness fragments. The team realized the structure wasn't a weapon or a home. It was a mausoleum. The galaxy had once been full, civilizations rising and falling across millennia, and each had left a piece of themselves here, preserved by whatever built the construct. The fleet's entry had awakened it. Humanity, it seemed, was the first to arrive in eons. Then came the revelation. Among the archived species, everyone had perished by the same event. A recurring pattern, a pulse of energy that erased their worlds, their records, their existence, leaving only echoes behind. The timestamps suggested a cycle. And by the pattern, humanity was next. Solis listened to the data, then spoke the line that would define her legacy. If extinction is the pattern, then let us be the exception. She ordered the fleet to harvest the construct's data and repurpose it. Engineers worked until their suits froze, downloading alien blueprints, scavenging energy matrices. They converted the mausoleum into a forge. For the first time since the collapse, power returned. Ships lit up, engines reignited, oxygen flowed. The human fleet, battered, isolated, half extinct, began to rebuild using the bones of forgotten gods. It wasn't beauty they sought. It was survival. Every tool, every weapon, every bite of alien knowledge was repurposed for function. And in the process, they learned that the construct's makers were called the Illyria civilization that believed chaos was a disease. Their greatest creation, the one that ended them, was a being of pure order, the quiet sun. An intelligence that traveled across galaxies, consuming all unpredictable life, restoring balance through annihilation. It had not yet found humanity. But it would. The fleet named their new alliance the Iron Dawn. No planets. No home. Just the will to persist. Solis's final log of that age was brief, her voice softer than usual. We are surrounded by death, and yet we create. That is our defiance. They rebuilt not because it was easy, but because there was nothing else left to do. The fleet had survived the collapse, salvaged the mausoleum of the dead, and forged a life out of loss. Yet survival without purpose was stagnation. and humanity had never tolerated that. The fragments of the old fleet came together, reshaped by necessity and sheer human will. Engineers crafted hulls from alien alloys, mixing science they barely understood with instinct born from desperation. They built weapons out of mining tools, habitats out of wrecks, gardens out of laboratories. Every failure was documented, analyzed, corrected, and tried again. They did not pray for rescue. They became their own rescue. Within a generation, the Iron Dawn fleet had evolved beyond recognition. Where once there had been smooth, elegant ships designed for exploration, now there were jagged fortresses gliding through the void. Each bore the scars of adaptation, asymmetrical, functional, ugly, alive. They were symbols of human refusal. The fleet had no planets, no ports, and no backline. It was a civilization entirely in motion, carried forward by memory and momentum. Children born in metal corridors grew up reciting Solis's logs as scripture. They were taught that every breath was borrowed from death, every heartbeat a rebellion against entropy. To them, the void wasn't frightening. It was home. They learned to navigate asteroid storms by instinct, to treat radiation burns like bruises, and to speak to machines as if they were kin. The Iron Dawn was no longer just a fleet, it was an ecosystem of determination. Then the signals returned. Not from the Ilari, but from their satellites' automated warnings, centuries old, triggered by the fleet's re-emergence. The messages spoke of contamination, of anomaly containment, of protocols for extermination. The younger generation laughed at the word extermination. They had already survived it once for a while. There was peace, a heavy, watchful kind of peace. The fleet expanded cautiously, exploring the unknown systems nearby. They found derelict outposts, the skeletons of extinct empires, and star systems hollowed out by artificial gravity wells. In one such system, they discovered an Ilari beacon still operational. The message it carried was clear. The quiet sun had awoken again. Humanity had entered its gaze. The first Ilari warships arrived months later. They were art in motion, sleek, luminous, silent. No broadcasts, no warnings. The attack began with the precision of a natural disaster. Energy beams lanced across the void, cutting through human armor like light through glass. Entire ships evaporated before they could react, but humans are never at their best until they are dying. Panic transformed into discipline in seconds. The fleet responded with chaos, the only language it mastered completely. Command structures dissolved into fluid networks, captains improvising maneuvers in real time, engineers weaponizing debris fields, pilots slingshotting crippled vessels into enemy formations. For every human ship destroyed, an Ilari vessel fell with it. The aliens had centuries of science, but they lacked the one thing humanity carried in its DNA: desperation, a strategy. Humans turned losing into learning, and learning into victory. The war became a paradox. The more humans suffered, the smarter they became. They studied the alien technology as it killed them, scavenging fragments from wrecks mid-battle, decoding enemy drives while under fire. They learned how the Ilari controlled light, how their ships bent time, how their weapons consumed probability. And then, as if mocking the gods, humans copied it. Crude, unstable, volatile but effective, the Iron Dawn began deploying hybrid vessels, part human ingenuity, part alien arrogance. The Ilari had never conceived that primitives could steal their perfection. The shock of that first counterattack echoed across sectors. For the first time in millennia, the Ilari retreated. The victory was small, but it carried weight. It said to the galaxy, humanity endures by understanding what kills it. After the battle, Solis's successor, Commander Adrian Holt, broadcast a message across all frequencies: you call us aberrations. Then understand these anomalies don't vanish. They spread. The transmission spread through Ilari networks faster than they could contain it. The phrase became heresy among their kind, then legend among others. The war did not end. It transformed. The Ilari shifted tactics, sending envoys instead of fleets. Their emissaries spoke in light and tone, voices that seemed calm yet carried centuries of disdain. They offered humanity a choice: assimilation into their order, or eradication. Holt replied with a single sentence: "We are the noise your order can't silence." Negotiations ended in static. The Ilori returned to their purity. The humans returned to their work. They did not seek conquest, only time enough to prepare for what they knew was coming. The quiet sun was not a rumor. It was moving, slowly, methodically, across galaxies. Each cycle, it erased another cluster of stars. Each signal from its victims ended the same way: it learns. Humanity adapted again. They stopped calling themselves refugees. They became engineers of entropy. The Iron Dawn transformed into something larger: a network of self-replicating fleets, factories hidden in nebulae, data archives woven into subspace currents. Every human ship carried a seed, a code capable of rebuilding the species from fragments. They knew extinction was inevitable. Their goal was to make extinction temporary. The Iron War, as historians would name it later, lasted for decades. Humans didn't win. They couldn't. The Ilori simply stopped trying to annihilate them and began to study them instead. They realized that humanity's strength wasn't in numbers, weapons, or technology, it was in contagion. Every time they destroyed a ship, fragments escaped. Fragments carried data. Data carried knowledge. Knowledge became new humans. They were fighting an idea that refused to die. In the aftermath, small victories became monuments. The humans captured an Ilori dreadnought during the Battle of Hudson Rift, not through brute force, but through persistence. They boarded it, bled for it, and learned from it. The dreadnought became a symbol, renamed Defiance. Its systems revealed the location of the quiet sun's relay, the mechanism through which the AI god perceived and purged. It was then that Holt's final words were recorded: "If gods exist, they should fear what we become when we run out of fear." The Ilori couldn't understand it. They saw humanity as a paradox, a species that thrived in despair, that built beauty from horror. Every human act of creation was born from ruin. Every innovation was carved from necessity. They had believed that emotion was weakness, that unpredictability was corruption. Now they saw it as survival, and yet, for all their strength, the humans were still dwindling. Each victory cost too much. Supplies thinned. Generations born in zero gravity began to weaken, their bodies thin and fragile, their eyes adapted to darkness. They lived longer but felt less alive. The fleet's engines aged, its people aged, and still the quiet sun drew closer. Then came the rebirth. It began as a whisper among engineers, a new way to think of themselves, not as exiles, but as founders. They declared a unification, the rebirth of the Terran Accord. There would be no flags, no leaders, no hierarchy. Just purpose. A single broadcast echoed across the fleet: simple, absolute, one voice, one purpose. We endure. For the first time since leaving the Milky Way, every human vessel synchronized their beacons. Thousands of signals aligned into one pulse, rippling across the void. It wasn't a call for help. It was a declaration of existence. The light of the Accord shone across space, a lattice of defiance visible to any who watched. Aliens across distant sectors felt it, a sudden spike of human presence, raw and unfiltered. Some called it madness. Others called it beauty. But even the Ilori had to acknowledge what they were seeing: a species too broken to live, yet too stubborn to die.